feature presentation.
Welcome back to another Untitled TIFF review. I am one of your hosts, Matt Rohrbeck, alongside, he's allergic to tomatoes, but he is tomato meter approved, Eric Marchin.
Matt, we're talking about a film that's going to stir up a lot of controversy. The bad boy of TIFF is here to discredit, to take down, to tear away, to tell everybody that's listening to this that loves the movie that won the Palme d'Or at the 2024 Cannes Film Festival that Anora is just okay at best.
Is that me or you?
Take it away. Well, I mean, I had a brat summer. It seems like you are having a brat fall.
Yeah. Today we are reviewing Sean Baker's Anora. And yes, Eric already kind of spoiled it, but we will get into my thoughts. Which, yeah.
I'm more interested in your thoughts than I am praising this film because, I mean, there's been enough praise for this movie.
Yeah, we've all seen your hyperbolic tweet, Eric.
Yeah, we have.
So
I stand by it.
You're going to see two very different opinions on the film, but it's premiering as you're listening to this today at the Toronto International Film Festival. If you're listening to this the day that this episode came out, it obviously, Eric already mentioned, premiered at Cannes earlier this year. It won the Palme d'Or, which was the first American film to do that since Tree of Life. Team out. I think really interesting. A thing that we will agree on, a breakout and fantastic performance by Mikey Madison.
Some would say career defining.
Some might say that, of the likes of There Will Be Blood, and I forget what other movies you mentioned.
Citizen Kane, A Woman Under the
Citizen
Influence.
Kane. No wonder people were giving you shit.
Peter O'Toole and Lawrence of Arabia.
God damn,
I could go on. I'm legitimately. I'm not. There's no flippantness here. This is sincere.
I believe you and know you're sincere, and you're not one to be hyperbolic. You're not tweeting just to get clicks or to provoke or even try to praise just everything.
I'm not on the payroll.
You're not using buzzwords and things like that to try to get people just to click on your tweet and give you a like. When you say something, I know you mean it. So that whole debacle, which I always think is funny, we're focusing on the negative. Obviously, a lot of people were very happy about your tweet as well and gave you a very passive like. You just, the people who are fucking weird and will complain about someone liking something doesn't make any fucking sense to me. But anyways, people will also complain probably after I say, I do not like this movie very much. And this is coming from someone I genuinely really, really enjoy Sean Baker's work. I absolutely adore the Florida Project and Tangerine and Red Rocket. So I was very disappointed with how I felt after seeing this movie, but you will get two very different opinions. Eric, it's day 3. People have already heard me ask you if you've listened to our reviews of Saturday Night or The Life of Chuck or
The Brutalist. As you blank.
Yeah. Sorry, everyone. I'm my brain is fried already. But how are you doing? My brain's obviously fried.
I'm okay. I'm not too far off from where you are, just in terms of feeling a little bit sleep deprived, or at least thrown off in terms of routine, and not maybe getting those 8 hours that is necessary to,
especially in our elder age.
Yes, in our late. I mean, we're getting close to 40, Matt. So
I know, yeah. So we joke, but we're not super young men anymore.
No, and I appreciate anybody that has the stamina to watch more than 4 movies a day. But yeah, I would say overall, you're just trying to find that pace that works for you, and I think specifically, the best way to do that is to take it day by day. Like, obviously have a schedule, but if you're not feeling like seeing a movie, don't force yourself, because it's not fair to you in your body, but it's also not fair to the film, because even if you don't end up liking the movie and you see it later, or you watch it in a state of feeling a little bit disoriented or exhausted, you need to you need to retain something from the movie in order to review it or discuss it, or prep for an interview, or just enjoy as a film watcher. And I think every movie deserves a fair shot when you buy a ticket, sit down, or as a press member, just take a chance on something. So, and I know you were quite tired when you saw Anora because you were coming back from Florida. But also, I think your thoughts are fairly not affected by exhaustion at that point.
I mean, they might have been. I think that always plays a part into it. I mean, I think what I've always said is when you're running off of very little sleep and you're exhausted from a very busy trip, the movie just has to work a bit harder to. I don't think I go in going, I'm going to hate this, or, I'm annoyed, or I'm annoyed. That didn't really make any sense. I went in hoping I would love this, and, a lot of things can play into that, whether you call it hype or expectations or things from Cannes and being a Sean Baker fan and your extremely hyperbolic tweet and
keep going back to that
and things like that, where I guess I'll just get right into it. I mean, I'll start with the negative, you can end with the positive, but yeah, a movie sometimes have to work a little bit harder when you're extremely tired, and I was hoping this movie would be a burst of energy after being sleep deprived and exhausted. And unfortunately, it just felt a little grating to me. It reminded me, of a rom-com version of Uncut Gems. And I know that's not an original thought. I've heard other people use that comparison. And, for people listening who might go, well, I don't agree with this guy, is I didn't really care for Uncut Gems either, right? So that we just talked about Saturday Night and that sense of, anxiety, or this nonstop kind of cross talking and people shouting and trying to get something accomplished, and, chaos and things like that, which I think this movie, obviously, does a lot of. Same thing in Uncut Gems. I don't know if it's just that kind of vibe that it doesn't work for me. I can't argue that Mikey Madison isn't great in the role. I just think what's surrounding her, I didn't care for. I think she's very natural. I think this is I don't know if I would go career defining, but I would say a breakout performance, even though I also think she was very great in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and Scream and things like that. I think she's good and very natural, and I bought her as Anora or any throughout the film. I just think for me, my biggest issue with it, I think maybe is the length, and I felt like every sequence goes on about 30 to 40% longer than I would like it to.
Right.
Where I'm kind of on its wavelength a little bit, but there's just certain times one point stands out in kind of the middle of the film that takes place in a living room foyer kind of thing of a mansion, that I was just sitting there going, let's fucking go, man. And then the whole movie of just people running around being like, where this guy is? Where this guy is? It's just the performance is fun. There's some slap, it's funny, I guess, at times. Just the comedy didn't really work, but people were laughing. I just think we've always talked about that comedies are very subjective too. And if you're not on a movie's wavelength where you're not laughing at it and the style doesn't work for you, it just becomes grating. So every little thing becomes worse than it probably actually is, where the scene's going on too long or the plot not being super interesting to me. And yeah, you can talk about it. You'll get into its metaphor about its anti-capitalist message and things like that. But I think when I found it so grating, none of those metaphors really kind of got its hooks in me to the point where I was even thinking about it during.
Well, you were also focusing on things that maybe if you had liked the film, you would probably, let it slide. Like, for example, Mark Edelstein, who plays Yvonne, this sort of
the
young
video game
impulsive,
stuff,
and so like I get that as well. Like when a movie isn't working for you, you begin to kind of like look at things that are going to be maybe something that a film critic or
would
writer
never even pay attention to, right?
Yeah.
So it's a great point. I forgot about that too, and I mentioned it in Saturday Night, in Life of Chuck, where in Life of Chuck, there's a moment where it's a period piece at a time where it takes place, in the 80s or 80s, I think.
80s.
And they have modern products, and in here it's one of my biggest pet peeves in movies is when you feature video games and it's very clearly the person either has never played a video game before or isn't. That there's nothing on the screen and it's just pretend to play a video game and stuff like that. So it's not necessarily a big deal. I can't be like, wow, that's the reason you didn't like the movie, but it's little things like that took me out of it again, because I just wasn't enjoying the humor or the kind of anxiety ridden kind of like, plot of trying to, find Vanya and with these kind of they're not gang members, but
they're kind of middlemen,
thugs, like
working for this Russian oligarch.
So anyways, it's just, I think my biggest issue was just each sequence going on for way longer than I would like it to.
And Sean Baker is the editor on that. So, the criticism is directed towards him, because it's also fascinating.
I love the guy, really, but
it is fascinating to look at it as well. Because I think another thing that maybe is worth talking about is that and I'm sure he worked with Mikey Madison on the character of Anora, or Annie, as you said. But I think there is an element of, well, he's the sole screenwriter and he hasn't written anything solo since his first movie, Four Letter Words. So I wonder if maybe working with somebody else in terms of like a co-writing capacity helps to kind of shape or at least tighten certain elements of the script, because it is interesting that you had that strong of a negative reaction to the film, considering you do like his other movies. And I was curious to know, like, I mean, I know you said it's the length of it, but what for you then makes Florida Project, which is filled with characters that are, a lot of people do or would consider obnoxious.
Oh, my dad,
especially when it comes to the shouting. Red Rocket as well.
I know, man, and I don't know whether I just found those depictions more charming. Weirdly, like it's not that. And they're sometimes shitty people, as in like Red Rocket and things like that. But
where Anora is less of I think, a shitty person. I think she is more likable in the sense of she's not perfect by any means, but nobody is. But when you compare her to
things that slurs she uses and things like that,
but in terms of the situation she's in and what's going on in her life, when you compare her to Simon Rex in Red Rocket, and Simon Rex in Red Rocket is a huge piece of shit
totally.
as a human being. But weirdly, you're still kind of drawn in by his charisma and understand why you would be kind of seduced by this, snake oil salesman in a way.
I like the style, and I mean, one things that I do love about Baker, using the same font in every movie, things like that. I do like his style and his aesthetic, which I've talked about a lot of filmmakers at this festival that I really vibe with, what they're doing, but at least from a style standpoint and a structure standpoint. But I don't know. I can't really put my finger on it. And again, it might just be wrong place, wrong time, right? Where maybe I revisit this down the line, watching all of Sean Baker's stuff and I'm on its wavelength, but I don't know, like there's something about Florida Project and Red Rocket and Tangerine, which sometimes are also meandering, and it may not be as chaotic as
they're
like
chaotic. I would say
they're
all
chaotic,
of those movies
but you know what
chaotic.
I mean by like the chaotic pacing. You know what I mean? Like the kind of, I was trying to explain this to you too, of like why I don't like Fury Road or another movie, Saturday Night, even something that we
Is it like a one day thing? Because even
a one day or
Tangerine takes place
is
over
one night. Don't
Christmas,
get me wrong,
yeah.
but there's something about like a nonstop, not really having a chance to breathe kind of movie that's just like starts and go 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 until the end. And I'm not saying this movie's necessarily that, because it does take a little while to get going, but it just, I don't know, like I don't know if it's a plot thing that I just don't find interesting, and then from a character standpoint, if I find them kind of shallow, but then in Red Rocket and Tangerine and Florida Project, I don't know, there's just something about those movies that and that click with me, and I laugh, like, again, as a comedy dramas, those all just work.
A dramedy, if you will.
Yeah, I hate using that term, but yeah,
I know, I do
dramedy.
too. It's a weird word.
Yeah. And this being, I guess a comedy thriller, really. And like, I think maybe that is that those other movies aren't thrillers, right? Like, they don't have that element of like danger per se. I mean, to an extent, I guess there's some moments in those movies that do, but I think that, again, we talked about the Safdies and things like that. Like those, I like the Safdies,
or even Ari Aster, right? Like, I mean, that's horror comedy in some ways, but those movies ratchet up the tension and anxiety in a way that we've been talking about in the last few years, in terms of almost like playing with genre expectations as well. But what I do really like, I love the movie.
Yeah, you love the movie. I've wasted enough time talking about why I didn't,
it's not a waste. I know. I think it is worth mentioning and being, critical of something that didn't work for you. It's just, I'm more curious just because, it does feel more in line. Like, it's not Baker doing anything he hasn't done before. And that in itself, I think, could be a fair criticism in terms of, okay, well, he's exploring the world of a sex worker again. Yeah. And, I think another criticism that could come into play is that, Baker's at a point in his career where, even though I think he's very empathetic and sensitive towards the subject matter and never judges or looks down upon sex workers, there is a feeling, though, that, maybe he's at a point in his career where he's no longer that independent filmmaker anymore, even though he's making independent movies, but he has, financial backing, and he can get things greenlit, and he's he's moving further and further away from where he started. And that happens with a lot of filmmakers where, when they start as kind of, outsiders or people that are struggling to get a movie made and using every single penny possible to put something together, you admire that. But it's like with Kevin Smith, right? Where, the Kevin Smith that made Clerks is not the same Kevin Smith who made Cop Out, right? Over time, he gets away from those grassroots and isn't, the everyman anymore. He's now built an empire for himself. And I think that is a fair criticism of Baker as well, just in terms of he's now getting bigger and more acclaim and more awards. And, he's going to easily get his next project put together. And not to say that it isn't a struggle, because even, filmmakers that have, financial backing or clout struggle, and that's just how the industry is. But I do feel like, okay, is he the same guy that he was making these other movies, in terms of like where he is, and does it feel sincere? In this case, I do feel that, but that's something I think to keep aware of. And I do feel that Anora, while complicated, is probably his most easily relatable and someone you can champion in terms of a character of his. Like, you're always rooting for her in this situation. You care about what she's going through and what is going on. And even though you know that this, fairy tale whirlwind romance of, this young client that, crosses paths with her, invites her into his affluent world, and they get married in Vegas, and then you have these three middlemen who are working for the parents, the father specifically, trying to annul the marriage. And like you were saying before, with that one sort of foyer sequence, which I think is kind of like the main set piece of the movie and goes on the longest, it's this weird blend of different genres and tones going on throughout the entire film. At times it feels like you're watching this fly on the wall cinema verite docudrama of somebody, working in a field that maybe you're unfamiliar with, but she knows what she's doing in terms of how to work a room and work with clients and able to make money and hustle and live a life that is fulfilling for her as a person, but then also being seduced by the possibility of not only financial stability, but also love and feeling this connection with somebody, even if maybe in the back of her head, because she's a very smart person, she knows that it's not going to work out. And we also know that, this isn't going to work out. And how this plays out, we see, an all-nighter sort of comedy. We see a slapstick sort of Buster Keaton Three Stooges routine. We see a hangout
I think
film.
that's kind of what anyways, keep going. Sorry.
And all of these things coming together, I think, kind of work or play with each other that complement each additional set piece or moment in the film. It's not that I don't disagree with you where it's very, in a way, simplistic in terms of what it is. It's ultimately, the parents of Mark Edelstein's character want the marriage to be annulled. He runs off and he leaves Anora with these three guys, and it's them looking for Yvonne. And throughout that night, it's them kind of hanging out together. But then what you realize is that the three gentlemen that are sort of, quasi kidnapping her, but then also trying to find him and to kind of, do what's being told of them, aren't in a dissimilar place from Anora. And, they're struggling as well because they're under the thumb of this man that basically dictates their entire life. We see the character of Toros, at a baptism and having to leave because his godson, his godson is basically, is acting. He's a kid. He's irresponsible. He's childish. He's, as I said, impulsive and makes irrational decisions. And, he's the guy that comes in and has to clean things up. And then we see these two other guys that, one's Russian and the other's Armenian. And, their, relationship to this situation being one where they're not muscle in the sense that they're not trying to hurt her, even though we do have the fear and anxiety of, like, we've seen these kinds of movies before and we know what can happen, but they're in a situation where they don't know what they're doing and they don't want anything to happen that's unnecessary. And it's not just simply about like, oh, let's kill her and like bury the body or something like that. And that, I kind of felt like there is some sort of strange camaraderie there where they're all victims of capitalism. And to where the final act goes, without ruining anything, you really understand, how horrible a situation Anora is in, and how you feel as a person that, you can be confined or trapped within, the systemic sort of wealth and poverty kind of clashing with each other, and the 1% will always win out over, the rest of us. And I think like that is a very relatable and understandable, and even if you don't necessarily feel like you connect to Anora in an emotional way, I think you can at least sympathize about the situation that she's in, and even her standing up to one character in a certain scene, I think will get a lot of people cheering. But all of that, which I really, really love, I do think this movie lives and breathes on Mikey Madsen's performance. And what I love about the character and what I love about her performance is that she feels like a real human being. She doesn't feel like simply a caricature. You know, the Brooklyn accent could have been something that leaned further into a stereotype or a one-dimensional
Is it Brooklyn or like New Jersey?
Well, it says that she's from Brooklyn.
Okay, then that's probably it.
So
That's my
it's
bad.
probably Brooklyn, but please correct me if I'm wrong, if you're listening to this and you know, but she's also her grandmother's from Uzbeka.
Yeah.
Is Uzbekian, I believe. I don't know if
yeah, I'll look it up
because it's not Russian. I know that because they said like it's Eastern European specifically, but she understands Russian even though she doesn't speak it fluently, and she talks about like not being able to roll her R's, or it's harder for her to do that. But what I like about the character is like, okay, like the kind of the voice and the performance, it's like, oh, it's feisty, it's fearless, it's daunting, it's irritating, frustrating, all of these things, but she's still a human being to the point where it feels like this character existed before the movie began and after the movie is ended, and that she lives outside of the margins of just simply the film. And it's a living, breathing thing, and that is what I love so much about the interior life of the character and the creation that both Baker and Madison have put together here, because it does feel like, okay, if you're going to center a movie around somebody, you really need to make sure that you've cast the right person. You need to make sure that the person in this role understands what is being asked of them. Yeah. You also have to understand that this is somebody that is going to walk this tonal tightrope and play within multiple emotions, and how does that react within each new scenario that's presented or built upon. And so with all of this, I feel like it really does come together in that way, where when like I think every actor in their career looks for that performance that defines them as an actor, and I think breakout is obviously, this is a breakout role, but what I mean by career defining is that this is the role that people I really do believe will remember her for, or in the sense of like when they talk about her, this is a character, a role of a lifetime, in that way that I mentioned with Orson Welles. When we think about Orson Welles, the performance, the character we think of is Kane, and we think of
the WWE wrestler.
Yes.
The mayor of Knoxville, Tennessee.
But, like I think like each actor that plays a part that is so defining also has to be aware moving forward that they could fall into typecasting, because in the back of my head, I got this horrible lizard brain thought of being like, oh, Mikey Madison would probably be a really great Harley Quinn. And part of me was like, oh, I don't want to think that way, because like I don't
know if I see that. I do understand what you're saying, but anyways, keep going.
But part of me is like, like any great actor that has that kind of role that launches them, that defines them, that is the role that they will be known for. Like even Peter O'Toole. Like Peter O'Toole did tons of great work after Lawrence of Arabia, but people kept going back to that performance, and people kept going back to that film. And I just honestly feel that that's the same way, that she'll probably do tons of great work after this, but this is that character that is so completely realized and completely lived in and brought to life in a way that anybody watching this movie will understand that this is something where it's like, it's lightning in a bottle. Like it's not every day you get this kind of character, And so with that, I honestly think that it is one of the best films of the year, one of the great performances in terms of character, in terms of casting, and just in terms of what Madsen brings to the role. And I think also the film around her, unlike you, works because it's almost, coming from her. Like it's her journey, not anybody else's. But I think the journey that she's on isn't as cut and dry as a film like this could be in different hands. Like I think like we've seen this kind of movie before, but done in a way that feels more wrought or more stripped down of any real complexity in character development or just in simple story structure. And I think with that, like there's just something really interesting going on. And we'll talk more about universal language. And I felt similar with that, where we've seen the individual pieces, whether it be themes or story, script in other films. We know the individual pieces, but when you put those pieces together in a way that you haven't seen before and reconfigure them, it creates something exciting and new. And I felt that with Anora, while still also very, being very much in the sensibilities of Sean Baker as a director. This is very much a Sean Baker movie. Like there's tons of shots, like a close up of a mouth screaming, or the way the movie looks. Like it's shot on film, but it almost has like a digital look to it at times, like a very slick, kind of polished appearance. And I honestly thought that the movie was very funny too. And
I think that's the main thing, dude.
Darkly
like it's just
funny.
Yeah, it's just, I think if something isn't funny, which is
and it's
such
Charles
a
Foster Kane. I just want to say that I was having a brain fart there in terms of just like.
No, you're good. You're good. I just think, if you don't click with something comedically, it's like everything around it, like it's harder to, buy in. And I feel like it's such a subjective thing of what you might laugh at, that I just feel like a lot of the movie, it doesn't necessarily rely on the humor, but I would put it in a black comedy, a dark comedy, a comedy thriller. And I just unfortunately didn't find it very thrilling and didn't find it very funny, but I'm very glad that you enjoyed it. And I seem to be obviously in a very small minority. So, that should happen sometimes.
But I also think it's fair in the sense of like, I'm not setting the movie up or the performance to fail, but my excitement and enthusiasm for the film, while genuine, in the same way that when something like this wins an award and you're told by everybody that this movie is great. Not that there's a rebellion against it per se, but there's a certain amount of expectations then you have going in that, okay, well, this movie has to be, the Amazing. Next coming of Christ.
And that's not fair to the movie per se, but it's also just natural how people are.
And
right?
how even film festivals work, right?
Yeah. So it's just, it is one of those things of the high expectations and different things like that. And I'm not giving an excuse. I stand by everything that,
and it didn't work for you. And that's,
I would have liked
fair.
this just to be a nice, tight 90 minutes, maybe 2 hours or something, right? Hour 45. Like, I feel like maybe I would have been on its wavelength, but
and I think there is a version of that movie. Like, I think that like some of the films that it is emulating, like, Howard Hawks and Preston Sturges, like guys like that, like there was a time when those kind of movies were being made and they were much shorter. But I think the way that, it's also funny because it's not just like you're simply dismissing the film because it is long, because we also just talked about The Brutalist, which being 3.5 hours, and the movie flies by,
Yeah. So it's just, it unfortunately didn't work for me, but it very much worked for you. So
yes.
Thank you all for listening. We really do appreciate it. We'll be back with more reviews of things like Conclave and The Apprentice and Night Bitch and other things like that. So keep it locked right here on Untitled Movie Podcast on YouTube and all podcast services. You can find all of our reviews over on Letterboxd. Please give us a follow over there, which is Untitled_movies. As well as follow both Eric and I at Matt Rohrbeck and at EM6211 on Twitter, where we will be posting our initial reactions to most of the films that we're seeing. If you want to be a little bit spoiled before you listen to us, but then if you want the more nuanced conversation, come back and listen to us. Try to get something out that resembles a discussion about a movie.
Something that's cohesive and
coherent.
And lucid.
We'll try to do that. It's only day 3. Yeah, come back on day 6 and see how these reviews go. So thank you again. I don't know what else I need to plug. Eric's going to do some reviews this festival. I'm excited for that as well.
Reviews?
Interviews. My bad.
How dare you?
And you wouldn't dare do a review.
You wouldn't steal a review.
And until next time.
Have you seen this kid? Have you seen him?
Have you seen any? Do you know where he is?
You know what? I got to say this quickly before we wrap.
Yeah.
You are completely okay with Robert Patrick doing that when he's looking for John Connor in Terminator 2, which is also a very long movie.
I agree.
Have you seen this boy? Have you seen John Connor?
I agree, but he murders some people. He murders the parents. He also I don't see anyone in fucking Anora running. I'm doing the run from Terminator, guys. And then
he's up there in run mode next to Tom Cruise, I think, totally. In that movie.
He doesn't, no one in this movie gets fucking knife hands and launches themselves at a car.
No, that's Transformers 1.
There's no fucking trailer truck going over a fucking bridge in this movie. Not like I'm a pea-brained idiot that needs action in a movie.
Sean Baker's Terminator movie.
That would be weird. All right, bye everybody.